And we are back again for season 2, episode 3. We've got 2 more we're adding to the returners list, and Mr. Caleb and Mr. Brock here. Today we were going to jump in with a little bit of a conversation around what we just discussed is a little bit more of a buzzword this year, grit.
Yeah.
And so hearing it more and more in commonplace, especially these football games picking up this fall. We're going to dive in and talk a little bit about it today. I want to throw it to Mr. Brock to start. Could you give us a definition of grit?
I could. I'm going to refer to this gem right here. Let's just go back to the basics, some good old textbook knowledge. Angela Duckworth, she's kind of like the founder of grit, essentially. It's such a big buzzword, like Nick said, but we're going to break it down today. We don't really know what some good qualities of grit are. How do we exercise grit in real life situations? But the basic definition that Angela kind of defined grit as is passion times perseverance. And the passion is just as necessary as the perseverance part of grit. I think when we think of grit, we think of perseverance more. It's kind of just like that, back against the wall. I got to bring it. But the passion part is just as important.
Yeah.
Throughout long stints, that passion can fade. So bringing the passion and perseverance, I think, is a good baseline to get things started for us today.
I like that.
That's excellent.
Mr. Caleb, anything you would add or anything that stands out there?
No, I like that it's combined with passion because sometimes I think that, for example, when it's used in football games, when we hear it used, sports and what have you, that person had grit. We think it's just a very small, just like one instance of being. So like it's just he had grit on that play, or it's just like something that happens singular very quickly. I think grit as a characteristic is much more long term, something that's built up, something that takes work. Every day. So it's not just, he had grit there. It's just like something that instantly happens and then goes away. I think it's more of a longevity type deal with grit than just discuss on kind of your everyday thrown around word.
I like that. The thing that we've talked about on this, I think once or twice, was the idea of also that passion, that perseverance showing and doing the things that you don't want to do, getting things done, specifically things that need to be completed that need to be done. Not just like random, you did something that was pointless, but that's when it really shows, as you hear about grit in the moments where maybe it's not the easiest to get done, because if you want to do it and you're there to do it, it gets done no matter what. So it's going above and beyond in those extra moments that I think grit finds itself especially important. So I guess I want to jump over to Mike real quick. And I want to talk experience with grit. Can you think of anything either in your training right now with athletes or in your training in the past personally, where grit really played a role, either a lack of it or the presence of it?
Yeah, so I would say for me right now, the most applicable example is probably some of the work I'm doing with athletes who, I hate to use the word, but claim they want to be better. But that's the way that's the word I'm going to choose, just because a lot of people will say, I want to be better. I want to be the best. I want to do X, Y, and Z. But when it comes down to putting in the work and showing up for themselves, right? They're not showing up for me. They're not showing up for their families necessarily. Deep down, it really has to be for themselves. I find that some of the athletes I work with have more grit than others. And by that, I mean the bandwidth to stay committed to our session, right? Most sessions are hour, 70 minutes, maybe 75, but stay committed to that hour session that we have, stay focused, work hard the entire time, and persevere through the challenges that I'm presenting them with. And I won't say I do my best to make it fair, but not easy. So I want it to be challenging. I want you to feel like I'm walking out of here and I'm being pushed a little closer to my limit. each time, but that is because the incremental changes in the compounding time of work that we're doing week in and week out. That is what's going to set them apart from other athletes. And the other athletes, some of the ones I have, we hold a plank for 45 seconds, right? We do 2 minutes worth of sprints where it's 20 seconds on, 20 seconds off, and then like a 10-second shorter one, however you want to break it up. And at 90 seconds, I can't go anymore. That's it. Like I'm gassed. This is all I got left. And then I say, give me one more. And like, okay, I can find one more. Well, in my mind, it's like, all right, so where's that grit? Where are you able to tell yourself, I can give one more. I can give 90 more seconds. I can give 30 more seconds. So those are the things I'm seeing right now. And those are some of the principles I'm trying to teach some of these kids, is that you have to be able to dig deep and stay committed the entire time. Having that mental, and I'll say the mental grit, right? And grit, I think, comes in many different ways. Having the mental fortitude to stay gritty, to stay tough, and to fully commit the entire time is a big thing right now with these kids.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think the pushing yourself to the limit is huge. And I think that in a state level, having individual instances of pushing yourself to that limit is huge. But on top of that, consistently pushing yourself to that limit is where you start to develop that trait and continuous grit. And that's something I want to get opinions from all you guys on. But is grit something that you either have or don't? Is it something that can be developed?
I'm 100% say it can be developed. Yeah, go ahead, Caleb. You got it.
I agree 100% that grit can definitely be developed. But I think that grit, in that sense, has to be channeled and used in an endeavor, in a physical feat, in some type of accomplishment that an individual has a true passion for. Reading back to that first word, and it's, as Nikki D knows, with that self-determination theory, it's intrinsic to them. So it has to mean something to them more than the pain or the uncomfort or whatever they're experiencing in that single moment. Whatever that endeavor, whatever that vision or goal, when completed, I think that has to mean something great to that individual, or else I don't think that grit is maybe as easily brought up, or that it is conjured up, if that individual doesn't really have a sense of being that I want to do this in the first place.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's got to be applied to, like said, a situation where it actually means something deep down to you in order to have to pull out that level of grit that actually matters. I think it can definitely be learned and taught, but becomes very challenging the older we get. Something I noticed working with a lot younger athletes is, obviously, as we're more impressionable, younger, we're able to build that trait, maybe facing some hardships early in life, maybe, dealing with issues in life, in sport, whatever that is. Those can build grit naturally, which helps if you let it, obviously. The older we get and the more stuck in our ways, I don't like using that too much, but we're creatures of habit. So the older we get, it's going to be harder to break those apart and instill that gritty mentality when we get older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, completely agree with that. You bring up an interesting point of the exposure to hardships and events early in life. I was talking with some of the guys over in the Special Forces unit over at our base on this topic. They're of the belief that you either have it or you don't. There's quitters and there's people who don't quit. So a little bit different from our room. I would agree with you guys that I think for the most part you can develop it. Before I give their thoughts on it, how would you guys develop it, or how do you go about developing it if you do?
I'd say for one example, it starts with, again, a vision of what somebody wants to accomplish. Because grit, they're going to have to leverage that when they are along this process, along this journey of whatever endeavor this may be. And it's that moment where their back's against the wall. They don't want to do X, Y, and Z, or they're challenged to do this. But I think there's a vision first that they need to embed in their subconscious mind that they are constantly seeing, that's tucking them in bed at night, waking them up in the morning, to where when they are faced with that challenging circumstance, then they've already had that, they've seen that vision 100 times in their head, 1,000 times in their head. And it's what they define as success. It's intrinsic to them. So then that snap vision of my success, of whatever that may be for that individual, has the ability to pull them through that situation over the pain or over the uncomfort or the obstacles that they're seeing right now. So I would say visualization would be a huge component of kind of what, again, that goal, that accomplishment looks like for that individual, having it mean that much to them, and that snap vision of what happens after just this little pain period I'm in here.
100%. That's a great way to put it. Incorporating good mental skills, obviously, like it should happen twice. You know, first time in your head, second time it should happen in real life. Like that's kind of what makes me think of that. You know, manifesting those hard moments before they happen is going to create a little bit more of a predictability in a way, which helps.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good question. How do we build grit? There's a lot of different directions we can go. One thing when I was taking notes before the episode that popped into my mind was the concept of an approach, event, response theory, which is being well prepared for the situation, which is, we know that the most elite competitors and coaches, they try to predict every possible outcome that's going to happen during a sports game, for example, and then they prepare for every possible outcome. That's what the best do. So that's the approach. How prepared am I? Am I able to handle when things go down the wrong track? Or like Mike said, am I just going to give up when coach says 30 more seconds because I don't know how to do it? Being that approach is a really big part of grit. You know, knowing that you're building the competence to go and face that situation. The event, it's gonna take care of itself. The response is a big part of grit, in my opinion. You know, how bad do you want it when things do get tough? The response affects the next approach. You have a bad response, your next approach is going to be bad. Good response, you're going to feel good going into the next event. So I like that concept a lot because it doesn't really let your emotions get in the way. I think that's a big buzzword with grit is emotions. Like, can grit and being emotional coexist? Like, how much of our emotions do we need to put aside in order to be gritty? So I'm going to throw out another question of, can grit and emotions coexist?
I like that a lot.
You're throwing me a lob to my next point, actually, Brock. I love that.
I like that.
There was a clip that's running around right now of an older sports psychologist that was working with Kobe Bryant. And it was a story that he tells about the end of the season. Kobe's got the last shot, game's on the line. He misses it. All right. Head in hands. He's on the bench, just distraught, right? At least it looks like it. He's there for quite a while. And when he gets off and talks to the reporter, whoever it is that it's chatting him up, they're like, "Oh, you must feel awful. Like you missed the last shot." And he looks at him confused. He said, emotions have nothing to do with it. Emotions don't play a role here. I was sitting there thinking about why the shot didn't go in or why the free throws didn't go in, whatever it was. I know why they didn't go in now, and I know what I need to work on. So I've got something to do this next offseason. And so for him, it seems like no would be the answer. And my answer to you would be, can they exist? Yes, but like only in an extreme state of present moment focus. I think that if you're experiencing that, awesome, but you can't have the past or the future kind of pulling your emotions in that moment. It's just got to be like organic. I don't know what you guys have to say on that.
Well, I definitely agree with that. And this kind of brings me back. I need to look up. I think it's Jill Bolte Taylor has the 90-second rule on how you experience emotions. In that most emotions, and when you have a thought, obviously our thoughts trigger emotion. So every thought we have is creating how we're feeling. And there's a 90-second chemical release when you first experience an emotion that the body automatically floods into the bloodstream. And after that 90 seconds, you're only experiencing that emotion because you're still thinking about the same thing, and those thoughts still have you in that same emotional loop. But those chemicals from the blood from just it naturally reacting are gone. So it is you consciously with your thoughts still keeping you in that emotional state. And so that kind of brings up a question that I had with the 90 seconds. And I've heard with different endurance athletes where they just have like kind of a 5-second window to turn whatever that thought off is or what have you to overcome that. And do you think that plays in with emotions here, that maybe you can be experiencing those emotions and still have grit, but it's the ability to turn that negative thought off and replace it with what you want, because at the end of the day, that thought is then causing that negative emotion holding you back at the current time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I want to bounce off this because I do a lot of work with self-talk in my coaching. I'm just very passionate about self-talk just because it has so much to do with our level of confidence, level of self-doubt. It just plays a huge impact in and out of sport. And I really like where you went with that, Caleb, of that short of like 5-second window. Like, at what point do I say, shut up, let's move on to the next play? I call it next play speed. I think that's a concept of how quickly can I get my emotions out of the way and operate on values. I don't know where I read this, but it was really wise saying make values-driven behaviors and decisions instead of emotion-driven decisions. That kind of ties in with what Caleb said. You're only attaching to that feeling after that 90-second rule because you're letting it. Your body's already gotten over it. So
That's good.
that's a great perspective. I want to bounce that to someone else.
Yeah, I like that value-driven piece versus the emotion-driven. I think that in my mind, the first thing I thought of is discipline versus motivation, right? I see those two being parallels because discipline and values are what ground you. Those are some of your core ideas, principles, whatever you want to call it. And those are the things that bring you back to, and I think this is kind of a buzzword thing or phrase right now. Like, what's your why? Like, everybody wants to say, like, what's your why? What are you doing it for? And I think it's important to ask that. But some of those things, again, that value driven and then discipline, those two things will bring you back to your baseline and to help, again, ground you and put you in a place where you can then clear mind assess whatever situation it is that you're in and make at that point, and I'm gonna try to tie these two together, the best decision, whether it's emotional or not. Sometimes emotions may need to be involved in there, and you need to think like, all right, I'm operating in this headspace, feeling the emotion. This is the decision I can make from here. What are the consequences of it, good or bad? And how does that affect myself and other people? So I think that's a really, really good point to make, and it can tie into a whole lot after that.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge, and I think we're circling kind of different phrasing around what Brock proposed in the original definition of passion and perseverance as well. Things like your vision, your why, fit into passion for me, and the perseverance being more of that value. And in the moment, that something that's driving your behavior versus that emotion driven. I don't know where emotions fits in with that, but I do think it's important to, again, tie it to this idea of like a single day is not going to break you, right? It's that emotion driven action that might cause you to quit, right? If I give any one of us right now a sizable physical challenge, Caleb's running a 100-miler soon, right? Let's take Caleb soonish, but we put him out there, right? A single day of training is not going to break him and cause him to quit. But the accumulation of 90 days gone terribly might cause him to fall short, right? But that's him allowing that past to live in that moment that he's in. Like that's letting day one snowball into day two, snowball into day three, snowball into day four. Sure, like you could have injuries and other circumstances that are there, but mentally, when you allow that to happen, that's when we start to quit. If you've got a 2-week training and you make it to the end of, let's say 2-a-days, you make it to day 10 out of 14 at 2-a-days. It's not day 10 that broke you. It's you thinking about, oh, I've done so much and I can't make it any further. And that is the lack of grit to me. Been there, but that would be the lack of it.
I like how that ties into being present. Obviously, with my company I've worked with Zone Coach, we're all about a present tense focus and being in the moment. There's studies that show often 80% of our waking hours are unfortunately spent in the future or the past, and only 20% in the present moment. And kind of Nick and D, just as you mentioned there, with having the past being replayed every day and being on a loop, that is in keeping you out of that present tense moment, and you're replacing it with thoughts that aren't serving you, thoughts that aren't serving your vision, thoughts that are negatively, whether you realize it or not, as you mentioned, influence you. And after day after day after day, where you're bringing that baggage from the next day with you, and in the next day and the next day, I do think that is that lack of grit there with not being able to shut that off at some point, shut the past tense thoughts off. And be present, or kind of replace them with, again, going back to that vision with whatever it is this endeavor is bringing to that individual.
So let me ask y'all this, okay? Let me bring up that point. When is it okay, and this is for anybody here, when is it okay for you to operate in the past or the future tense, like to remove yourself from the present situation, and maybe whether you're looking at a vision board, right? You're thinking about things in the future. You're thinking about these actions of the past led me to this point right now. When is it okay, as it relates to grit, is it okay to look at things from that frame of mind?
All right.
Brock, you want to start off on that one?
Yeah. So,
and then I'll lead up.
That's a great question. I think it's okay to go into the past when you're asking productive questions about why those things happened, instead of, I feel so bad. That was horrible. I am so upset about it. I don't care. Like, I tell my athletes, like, don't tell me the problem, tell me the solution. Like, what are we going to do about it? What did I learn from that? What am I going to do different? Asking productive questions about the past are valuable because you use them to build your future. If you're just going to the past just to reflect and feel bad for yourself, it's not going to help you out at all. Going to the future is productive, like you said, Mike. Vision boards. Caleb talked about visualization a lot. That has a lot to do with visualizing future positive outcomes. Envisioning just like great things you want to do, also super valuable. But I think most of our time should try to be spent optimizing the now, and just kind of using those as tools, but not the main source.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my response is going to come right from my company, from what we tell all of our clients. But our clients go into the past for learning and evaluation. That's kind of what you go into the past for. As Brock mentioned perfectly, asking questions. Why did I perform this way? What happened here that caused me to do this? What were my thoughts like that influenced a negative performance that maybe I didn't have? So I love to say, if you're learning, you're never losing. You can have bad performances. You can have a bad day. You can have whatever. As long as you learn something, as long as you take one little nugget from that and better apply that to the next performance, or better apply that to that next day, you're never losing if you're learning something. So definitely going into the past for evaluation and learning components. I think that future tends to definitely with visualization, seeing your vision, but for planning, for strategies, and for tactics. So you kind of have that roadmap towards your success. You've got that mapped out as to exactly what you want to do, and have sort of a roadmap or blueprint to follow. But definitely going into the future to, plan that out and see what exactly that you want.
I think those are good answers. Nick, any thoughts on that?
Not a whole lot on the past. I think they hit it. I think the downside of going to the past, as we've touched on, is that creates a lot of our distress.
Right.
And similarly, so is the future, especially anxiety is really tied to the future. Shame and guilt are more past. But going to the future, the only thing I would add is in physics, you talk about like when something has momentum, it also has to have a direction, right? And so having momentum in the moment, but not having a direction that you're moving isn't super helpful. I believe I've talked to Caleb, I don't know if it was on or off, but about at night is a good time to think about the direction that you want to be heading. The things like you guys have talked about with those vision boards, the game plan, what you ultimately want to accomplish. That's what that is. And it's not being so tied to it that you're strictly, this is the only way it can, work. That goes against what Brock mentioned with that approach event response, right? You need to be able to respond if things don't go according to plan. You need to be able to rethink and, be resilient, I guess, in that moment. But those would be the two little nuggets.
Yeah, I like that. And I would even challenge with anxiety being in the future. I do think that it's still rooted in the past because we're taking a past experience that we've had and then we do something crazy and use our imagination and project it into the future. Because it's still based off of a past event or past experience that we've had before. And now we think that, that's going to happen again when really that future hasn't even happened yet. So we're using our own imagination of a past event and then just projecting that into the future there. Which obviously is not serving us and helping us.
Yeah, I like that definition. I was thinking like one that's common with people is like debt. And so if you have debt, you think about in the future how it's going to come to get you. And the truth is in the present moment, like it really doesn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it hasn't happened yet. If you're living right now, it hasn't happened. So yeah.
Mr. Brock, I know you had some notes coming into it. Is there anywhere that you want to go with this or something that we haven't hit real quick?
Yeah. I want to go just to the perseverance piece because I think everyone kind of understands their deep-rooted passions for the most part. Obviously, people need help with that a little bit, but the perseverance is kind of, I think, where you get that grit characteristic from. Like when you just see a guy and you're like, oh, he wants it. Like you can just almost see it. Like it's kind of scary when you look at someone and you're like, oh, that dude's gritty. Like that guy definitely wants it.
You can feel it too, even more than
how can we become more? Yeah, like it's like how can we create that energy and that vibe more? And I think, there's so many different directions to go with that, but the one that obviously personally really ties to me deeply, I have it tattooed on my arm. Pain is guaranteed, suffering is up to you. When I think of grit, that's kind of the quote I think of.
That's tough.
I got to put on my arm like literally a week after I turned 18. I couldn't even wait. That's kind of the embodiment of grit for me is the pain is guaranteed, the suffering is up to you. What does that mean? Well, it can mean a lot of different things, but to me, it just means you're going to face those moments. They're going to be guaranteed in life. Your reaction and your response to the potential suffering is what defines you.
Right.
That's when it really comes down to crunch time. Like, how bad do I want it?
I'm gonna let you know, Brock. I'm still in that, dog. I'm still 100%. I'm still in that. I got a group session tomorrow with a high school basketball team, and we've been talking about togetherness, toughness, perseverance, grit, like all of these things. And that line right there, I'm still in that. Shamelessly and letting them know, like, look, the pain is guaranteed, and the suffering is up to you. Y'all gotta decide if you're gonna be committed now. And if not, then let your coaches know, let your teammates know, like, this ain't for me. Yeah. I'm not that guy, and I'm cool with admitting that to y'all. Find somebody else who is that guy who can fill this role and be who y'all need him to be. So that's a good one. That's a really good one.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, can you deliver when it's crunch time or not?
Right.
You know it. You have that vibe to you. Like Caleb said, you can just see it on some guys. Mm-hmm. That has to do with that stoicness in a way. I think the word stoic would be a really good one to throw out there into the air in terms of grit. I think there's some correlation there. The stoicism tied into essentially, I don't care. Let's keep going. I don't care. Like another minute on the plank. I don't care. Let's go. Give it to me. Give me another minute. I don't care. Let's go. That sort of unfazed response. of just like, bring it on, let's go. So it doesn't matter, I don't care.
Yeah.
Is sort of like stoicism. I think that's a big correlation with grit. So let's talk about being stoic. What do we think about that?
Right. That's good.
I like that. I think that that we can relate a certain level of apathy in regards to feelings or emotions in that little window, that 5-second window, maybe when your back's against the wall and you want out. With stoicism, it is just, we're moving forward. More, I'm present, and any external factor is not influencing me. I'm completely just kind of the man in the arena alone, so to speak. And I think there is a level of apathy that is good with how you're going to experience or how some of these emotions may make you feel, that you can detach from those and say, I don't care how this is going to make me feel right now. I don't care what I'm experiencing right now, because I know in the end it is a much greater goal or a much greater outcome that I'm working towards.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that idea, that big outcome, ties into another piece for me of, we like to refer to it as goal chunking, simply, but hey, Brock, if I tell you that you're going to hike the Appalachian Trail and you think about it as you've got to hike the whole Appalachian Trail, you're going to say like, no, dude, that's way too much. Like, I'm not doing it. But if I look at you and I say, hey, can you walk like 3 miles? You'd be like, yeah, I guess I could do 3 miles. And taking it those 3 miles at a time and breaking it down into something that's sizable and manageable helps prevent some of what we were talking about with the accumulation of things in the past. And so looking to that and having a stoic attitude in that sense, not necessarily, you're not accepting everything that's happened as positive, but being able to say something that, shout out to FSU, is like, I'm unconquered regardless of what has happened. I'm here right now and I'm moving forward with like baby steps, manageable bite-sized pieces that I can consume.
Yeah.
I can relate that. I'll just share a little personal example here on the 50-mile trail run that I did earlier this year. And that race was broken down into a 10-mile loop. But there was aid stations every 2.5 miles. She had one in the middle of the first 5 miles of that loop, and then you had an aid station on the second half of that 5-mile loop. And there's definitely a point where some grit came in here. There was about lap 3 where we're just starting lap 3, and the vibes are definitely not as high as what they were when we started on the first mile when it kicked off in the morning. And I was able to, as you mentioned, that chunking to where maybe 10 miles or 30 miles, definitely. It's like, I got to go 30 more miles right now. Like, hang on here. But taking each lap and breaking it down to where there's aid stations, like, I got 2.5 miles in me. I can definitely get to the aid station. We'll figure out what's shaking there. And then we got another 2.5 after that. And so related in that sense, it's kind of that real world application of, it's not always doing the entire process at once or thinking that you have to do that entire way. With being on mile 1, you don't want to be thinking about mile 50. And that's 12 hours from now. So let's not put that thought into mind. But being able to, kind of segment off and having an elephant one bite at a time, and breaking those goals down into manageable sizes to where you get a little momentum going. And all right, I got 2.5 miles. I got another 2.5 miles, and I got 5 miles. And the last lap on mile 40, starting the last lap, I felt almost as best as I did at the beginning of the race. And my last 4 miles were my fastest 4 miles of the entire race on the back of the prairie. And so, like, we had stuff in the tank. But, like, if you would have, like, lap 20 lap 2 when I started there, 20 miles in, like, I was questioning. I had some thoughts, like, well, are we really doing this? We got 30 more miles, and then get through chunk that little 10-mile loop off, and then mile 46, we're clipping along at 8:30s, and like, we're taking this thing home. Let's go. So I definitely think that breaking that down into those bite-sized goals can definitely help add to that grit at least, and build some momentum and not seem too daunting in the beginning.
Sweet. I'm gonna throw it back to you guys, but I want to play a little game here and switch to a pretty applied thing. So I've got two scenarios, generally speaking, and I want to hear whether you would emphasize trying to hit the passion or the perseverance piece that we've said attribute to grit, and what you would specifically do with that individual who's experiencing that situation. And so my first situation would be someone who has been training at a very high level, has been just doing everything they can. The practice is going well, the workouts are going well, feeling good, like to take a bigger role, looking forward to getting out, and we'll say it's running. So they run like an 800. Big meet, a lot of expectations that they're going to, do well, but hopefully be excellent. Doesn't go well at all. Eat the bed. Just didn't have it in the tank. No explanation for why they're there. They felt like physically it's that they're in that zone, and just race day didn't happen. What are you doing in that moment? Kind of backs against the wall. Performance was not there. How are you talking to them? What are you working on?
I'll start us off. I think in that instance, I would lean more towards the perseverance component of that definition versus the passion. Because in that example, if you did have solid training block leading up to that, but then on that race day, for whatever reason, performance did not meet that individual's standard, I think it kind of goes back to that learning, and as Brock said, asking better questions. In that instance, talk to that individual. Hey, well, what thoughts are you having that day? What happened in this race? Non-judgmental, no emotions, just a complete evaluation. This is what happened. And then apply that so that they're learning from that experience, but that they're still had a successful training block. All the work they put in was not all for naught. This is just one rung on the ladder that maybe a setback right now, but it's just going to be a building block in whatever that long-term goal is, maybe for the next meet. So that is, I think I'd target more of that perseverance side that, hey, the work that you're doing, there's validation behind it. This could have been one outlier, but just know this is one rung on the ladder towards whatever that success is that you're climbing. Let's evaluate and then just continue to do the work that we have been doing.
I like that a lot.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's not one answer isn't right over the other. I love the perseverance piece. And it kind of ties a little bit in with passion. Like I'll touch on the passion side just to complete the equation here. Kind of bouncing off what you said, like, how do we use our training to stay passionate moving forward? Like, how do we surrender the outcome? That's kind of a good tagline. How do we surrender the outcome and still find passion in our training when we're not seeing the results that we want? The hardest part is working your tail off, and weekend after weekend, month after month, you don't get anything out of it. That's when grit really has to show. When you feel like you're working hard enough to where the results should be representing that. So like sort of the input-output scale. Those are gritty moments. That's when you really got to put your emotions to the side and say, I got to find a way to keep training. I got to find a way to get up at 6 a.m. and still hit the trail. What is my passion to keep doing that even when the outcomes show none of it? On paper, it would look like I train one time a week, but it's the complete opposite. How do I not let that define me, but rather know that my deep-rooted passion for growing as a person, regardless of, like you said, one meet, how do I still let that keep me going, keep me ticking?
I like that a lot.
Mike,
anything you would add in?
Not necessarily to pick a side. I think it is very, very balanced out here, but I have a practical example, and I think running is probably one of the best teachers of life. truthfully. Like running is one of those things that I think, Caleb, you're realizing that what you put into it is what you get out of it. It is, and you get immediate feedback most of the time. And I have, and coaching high school kids is very, very tricky because you have a very short time frame to figure out who responds well to what type of training, because not everybody wants to run track. Some kids just want to run cross country and then they don't come around for track, or vice versa. And so you don't get that year-round time with them to really figure out, what do you benefit from best. And so there are several kids on my team right now who have been putting to work. They have been surrendering the outcome, right? And they have been showing up and making it happen in practice every single day. But it's frustrating as a coach, and I know it is as an athlete, to have to surrender the outcome when you think that, man, I should be performing well right now. Like, I've done everything that I've required myself to do, that coaches require me to do, all the little details and extra things that are supposed to help me. Why am I not getting this outcome? So that's just like a practical piece I've seen recently, and I think that is so important to the development of kids and people in general. Like, what are you willing to surrender to keep going until you get the outcome that you desire?
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think it's particularly relevant with that next play mindset of how you carry yourself when there's not an immediate next play. That mindset doesn't go away. You're looking for an excuse to throw it away because that's easy. But end of the day, you still have control over this moment. That is your next play. The moment is your next play. It's a play for mindfulness, right? Right. So staying present focused and deciding how you're going to define each of that, and tying it in with what Brock had said about having a reason why that is going to be timeless and not entirely outcome driven is huge when it comes to things not going correctly, because the outcome's easy when you're getting the rewards.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's hard after. Second scenario, I'll start to wrap it up here, is going to be, I'm going to use myself as the example here because last time I don't think it went as smoothly as it could. But let's say I am at a company where I feel like I am just lights out performing. All right. I am going above and beyond. I'm joining extracurricular groups. I'm putting on events. I'm helping with professional developments. I am taking care of everything that I need to do and then some, exceeding goals, expectations, but I'm a newer employee. All right. I'm even helping other people, as in you can use some of the stuff that I've produced and, feel free to, incorporate it into your own work. If that's helpful to you, I'd love to work with you on it. And you turn around and see everyone get promoted, including the people who you're helping. How do you find grit to lock in and continue to work hard every day in this scenario? How do you help someone with that?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna actually jump on this one first because I've personally experienced this, but I've also had people speak into me about this situation or this circumstance in particular. And for me, it's a very short, sweet, and simple answer. Show up, add value, continue to be a good person, and you'll get recognized, right? Like eventually. And I think that goes back to what Brock says, like, surrender the outcome, right? Don't worry about who's getting promoted, because I don't think that people want to undermine someone else. Like intrinsically, that's not what people are out to do, to crabs in a barrel pulling people down. I truly think that most people want to see other people succeed. And so if you are doing your job, you're doing it well, you're being a good person, you're showing up and you're adding value, regardless of the outcome and who gets promoted or what the situation makes itself out to be, you are, kind of like Caleb said earlier, you're winning, you're learning, right? You are learning about yourself. You're learning about the group or groups of people that you're interacting with and working with. You are still winning. You just have to reframe your mind on what that winning looks like. So I feel that one like really, really deep in my heart. So if anybody is really struggling with that one, or has questions or wants to talk deeper about that, please like reach out. Like, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what it is that that you want to see, and how we can help you surrender that outcome, and keep allowing you to show up as the best version of yourself and adding value in those places that you're in.
Great. No, I mean, that's great insight, Mike. I just love the input of being a good person. Like, that gets so overlooked in the workplace because of how much we value output.
Right.
Like,
Right.
doing quality work and being so much better than, just being that annoying coworker that's might be making more money than you. Like, that's not going to help you in the long run in your own professional development.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just being that good person is going to make the difference down the line, even if in that present moment, you're outworking them, but they're actually receiving the, money benefit or the social approval benefit, or, whatever that is. It's hard to, in that moment, accept that, knowing that I'm working harder but not getting the output. It ties all back into,
Right.
and what's the solution? Am I just going to stop working hard? Like, what am I going to do? Stop working hard because it's not working now? Or am I going to just keep doing quality work, knowing that if my boss recognizes it or not, I'm still going to apply my personal work ethic, knowing that it's going to help me out as a person.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I definitely agree with that. I think kind of those 2 points definitely touch on that passion. Is if you love what you're doing, and it's, again, intrinsic to you, and you're learning, and maybe you're not being recognized by the boss or whoever that individual may be. I think it does come back to one of the biggest challenges that we all face, is how do we react when our expectations don't meet reality? So that the work that we put in every day, the extra above and beyond work, then in this case that you put in, is not being recognized. How do you deal with that? And coming back to that, is this something that you truly love? Is this something that you foresee yourself doing in the long haul as a career, making it your profession and not a job? I like the term job, but if it is something that you truly love and have a passion for, then that is a lifestyle. And I think a great point that Brock and Michael both brought up there is that when you're learning, you have experiences every day where you can gain new knowledge. You can learn something about yourself, learn something about the environment, learn something about the team members, learn something about how you interact with other individuals. And if you can kind of bring the attention and the focus back to that component, that you're still receiving value, maybe not in the eyes of the company or in the eyes of your boss, but you're receiving value that's even more important than that for yourself. And then let's look at other options. Let's go into the future a little bit and plan. Is there another fit where your talents may be appreciated more? Because there's always multiple channels out there where we can take our passion, our pleasures, and help other individuals, and just not with one corporation. So definitely seeing if this is something that I have a passion for and truly love doing, are there other avenues that we could go down that my talents would be maybe more greatly appreciated?
I think the other thing, and to tie it in with Caleb, you guys hit the values perfectly, right? You're leaning on those values. You're leaning on that passion, because at the end of the day, if that's what's driving you, that outcome that you're surrendering, right? It doesn't matter to begin with. You're there because you want to be a good person. You're there because you want to do well at your job. You're there because you like learning. You're there because you are someone who works hard, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not seeing your values you're not able to show your values in action, if you will, then maybe that's a time to reflect, and that's a time to plan, like we talked about, and come out of that present moment, right? Yeah, Mr. Caleb,
that was tragic there. I'm sure it just cut off mid conversation. I don't know. The internet just dropped out there on me, so apologies there, fellas.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was
Not
grabbing
ideal.
up with something similar to you of like passions hit really, really well.
Yeah.
But there is time to reflect and plan. If
Mm-hmm.
what and who you are isn't being reflected in your day-to-day work, right? Like this isn't saying suck it up and stay with your job. There are the realities of maybe it is time to get a new job. But if you're leaving for a new job, you should not be leaving for a new dollar sign, period. Like you should be leaving for
Mm-hmm.
something that is fulfilling in and of itself, that day-to-day task and workload, what you're actually doing should drive that passion. And that'll make it easier to
Absolutely.
persevere, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Sweet. We'll wrap it up here. And Caleb, feel free to use a little bit longer piece if you want to touch on anything that may have been cut. But biggest takeaway from today or something that you want to implement a little bit more in your own life? We'll go around the horn.
Mine is quick. Two things, and hopefully I can recall these properly. So, like Brock said, painted. Brock will run it back one more time. I want to make sure I'm.
Yes, sir.
Pain is
Guaranteed.
There we go. Pain is guaranteed, and suffering. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. So pain is guaranteed, and then the suffering is your choice, right?
Yeah.
Right. So those two things are gonna those two things, but that one thing is it really just hit home for me. And then the second one is surrender the outcome. Like I don't know what it is, but those I really feel those in my heart, and maybe it's because I've been working with youth recently, and they have yet to really realize that. And I don't think maybe I didn't realize it myself, but being able to make those two things connect, and hopefully make them connect for them, I think that'll be huge. So those are my two things. I'm gonna share that. I'm sharing that shamelessly as much as I can. Yeah, I'm sharing that as much as I can because I think it's great, and I think a lot of people can benefit from that.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. I'll add my kind of closing statement of kind of just a summary of grit that I want to embody right now that I've been thinking about recently of how can I be more gritty? I think that's a good question to ask ourselves. It's quite simple as well. Lean into the hard things. Do things because they suck. Like I was talking to Nick before the episode. I don't like running. I don't have good running form. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't feel good. Nothing's really internally enjoyable about it at all. I've been going on a couple more runs lately. Why? No, I don't like it because it sucks. Because I want to lean into those uncomfortable situations because they're probably going to reap some beneficial outcomes. Like I want to encourage all of you to just seek some uncomfortable situations. You don't want to go get in the kitchen after work at 7 p.m. and meal prep for the week. Well, do it because it does suck. It's not really that enjoyable. You don't want to get up and go to the gym. I don't really care. Do it because it sucks. I don't think I've ever walked out of the gym and felt worse than when I walked in. That's all I got.
Real good.
I like that a lot, definitely. And with that grit, one thing for me that I kind of want to apply in my own life is grit in other areas. So for myself, grit may come easy in physical endeavors, so to speak, when we think about running miles or lifting weights or getting up in the morning. One thing for me that I've really been trying to implement is at least a 10-minute sort of meditation and gratification in the morning. And I have been challenging with my self-discipline to do that every morning. And we don't really associate meditation with grit or taking grit to meditate. But I think meditation for all of us is uncomfortable. It's out of our comfort zone. It's something that we're not often doing, and just being present for 10 minutes and actually blocking out all of those thoughts is that it takes practice. Like any other physical skill, that's a mental skill that kind of takes that repetition. And sometimes it doesn't come easy. And it's not always easy to sit there just blank screen. But that's kind of that meditation and grit I've never really thought about or associated. You need to have grit to do meditation. But after this discussion, I can see that kind of that passion and that perseverance has to be there for whatever kind of want from that meditation outcome. So that's kind of one thing where I shifted perspective with, that it's going to take some grit to meditate, even though those kind of sound like polar opposites almost.
And I'm right there with you, Mr. Caleb. I think that being intentional at the end of the day, rather than the beginning, is where I'm looking. But same ideas from your book. Actually, I did try the intentional dreaming a couple of times, just like what I want next day to look like, and it actually was super insightful. And I felt like I was more prepared going into the next day. But it's something that I kind of let slip away, worked on some different things, forgot some different things. And so reincorporating intentionally thinking about how I want the next day to look as I'm trying to fall asleep, and setting aside time for that. The last thing I want to say, I forgot to wrap back around to this, but I mentioned I would go to the Special Forces and what they do and how they develop grit and why they think you either have it or you don't, is entirely exposure. I don't necessarily fully recommend it. Like, they're just, quite frankly, they're just taking the boys out back every time anything goes wrong.
Okay.
I think that might also be why they break so hard when they do break. So I would highly encourage some of these other methods, and I'll encourage everybody listening to come up with their own. But if you made it this far, I wanted to mention I didn't forget, and circle it back around to that. That will also develop grit. It may lead to other issues too, but it works really well for some people. Sweet. I think that's what we got for episode 3. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you made it this far. Free to you, only helps us, so that's huge. And have a great rest of the week.